Hello there, everybody. First of all, let's see if anybody's here. Oh, wow, there are people here. Believe it or not, there are people here. It was like a ghost town a moment ago. I'm serious. I was like looking here and I'm going, wow, there's nobody around. Where did everybody go? The eclipse has you all afraid. I'm hiding. I'm hiding. It's getting so much hype in the media that I'm going to hide and I'm not going to leave my house. Right? Is that where everybody's at with it? It must be, because it's quiet here, not neglecting those people that are here, but it's like, goodness, it's quiet. Hey, there's one person. Hello, one person. Now there's 7. Wow. Where did they all come from? 8. Wow. It's like randomly it goes from like 2 to 8 in like 2 seconds, right? How's everybody doing today, right? I hope everybody's doing okay and that you're not getting eclipse freakout mode going on, as most people tend to do right about now. And certainly eclipse periods can be a little bit tricky. They can also be very confusing for individuals. And so, it makes it pretty intense in regard to things and how to cope with it. But, one of the things that I wanted to really talk about today, right? And I want to say that I tried to kind of pull together a few of my friends for this conversation. But, I'm over in Europe and, most of my friends are scattered all over the planet, meaning my astrological friends. So it's hard to either connect with people this time of day who are available on a Sunday or who are awake on a Sunday, dependent upon where they are. So you have to just deal with me by my lonesome, and I hope that's okay. But one of the things I wanted to talk about today is how people tend to freak out with eclipses, right? And certainly, as I was saying before, it's a bit of an intense period of time. The psyche undergoes a lot of changes during that time. Around eclipses, your body undergoes a lot of changes too, because your body's getting ready to have to cope with the changes and shifts that are getting ready to go on in your life. But people tend to make sometimes a bigger deal out of it than it actually is. Now, I said a bigger deal out of it than it actually is. Does that mean that it's not a big deal? No, it is a big deal. Eclipses are pretty important periods. They mark very profound changes and a shift in your evolutionary path for about the next 6 months to come, right? And, actually even on past that. But the reason I say the next 6 months is because really you've got another set of eclipses 6 months from then, right? So a lot of people are likely seeing all sorts of things in the media, saying things along the lines of, like, wow, this eclipse is going to end the world, or this is the first solar eclipse in, thousands of years, and it's a complete load of rubbish. You have a solar eclipse like twice a year. It's just you don't always see it, right? And so it's getting hyped up a lot more in the media because the media is becoming more aware of it. And so it's making a bigger deal out of it. And in connection with that, you didn't miss anything, Farah Jade. You just got here. Okay, so it's you didn't miss anything. I'm just talking, right? So hey, everybody, why don't I just kind of recapitulate for the sake of Farah Jade? I don't really need to do that. I'm just talking today about how people freak out around eclipses, right? And really, on a certain level, it's understandable because it's a big change, right? It's a big change we all go through. But the media hypes it up to be much more than it is, because really we have this happen twice a year. We have it happen twice a year, right? So what makes an eclipse big? What makes it really big and momentous for an individual? Well, if it's transiting or forming an aspect to certain points in your chart, that's going to make it a little more intense too, right? If you have any planets in the nakshatra where the eclipse is happening, that can make it pretty intense too, right? And so it is an intense period, but it's not like the end of the world. It might be the end of one world, but that's a world that you didn't need anyway. And that's why you're having the end of that world, because a new world's getting ready to begin, So one thing I wanted to kind of connect with people today about is to keep them from freaking out with the eclipse because of things that you're hearing in the media, right? It's not the end of everything. You don't have to hide. You don't have to be quiet and not say a thing during the eclipse. You don't have to, not interact with anybody. You know what? You can even have an astrology consultation on the eclipse. I've kind of got that set up. As a matter of fact, I think that can be good for you, right? I've got consultations set up on the eclipse because that way you kind of know what it's all about, right? And here's the other misconception while I'm on that particular topic. People also think that if they don't have a consultation prior to the eclipse, that they're somehow going to miss something. Well, the changes that the eclipse brings about are going to be there for a while, right? As a matter of fact, it's the period between sets of eclipses that all the really profound change begins to happen in. So it's kind of dispelling a lot of the myths. You don't have to have your consultation. If you're having a consultation with myself or any other astrologer, you don't have to have it before the eclipse. It will still be meaningful if you have it after the eclipse, right? Secondarily, you don't have to hide from doing everything in your life because there's an eclipse going on. What you do have to do is you just got to be a little more aware that a lot of the things that you're feeling inside of yourself are there because of what's happening in association with the eclipse, right? It's there to bring changes. It's there to help you to shift. It's not there to be created by some punishing God to give you a really hard time in every single part of your life. It's not like that. Anything that happens in your life is about your prosperity, right? It's just sometimes you may feel like you don't have the strength with which to confront those challenges, and so it feels a little more intense. But you're not being cursed. You're not having horrible things happen in your life, or maybe you are having horrible things happen in your life. But if you are having those horrible things happen in your life, it's because they're necessary in order to create the needed changes. What is India going to feel tomorrow? Well, I tell you what, I'm going to pick up my phone and I'm going to call every single person in India and I'm going to see what they're going to feel, right? I'm only kidding. I'm not going to do general predictions of what each country is going to feel tomorrow. I'm not even here to do general predictions based upon individuals' charts. What I am here to do, if you all want to interact, and I know there's a lot of you here, if you want to interact in the chat window, tell me a little bit about your experiences and what's going on for you. I can maybe help you with some of the experiences that you have going on, but I'm not going to interpret your chart here on the spot. I'll tell you why. And I say this every single time, but people always ask every single time. And I do it occasionally, but I'm always, when I do things like that, I'm always very big on letting people know that this is just based on vast generalizations in association with your chart. All these things will not necessarily, if I make that assessment, come to pass. Right? Because I'm looking at 2 or 3 things in your chart and giving you a prediction of what's going to happen to you because of that, when really I need to look at your whole horoscope. Okay? So if you do want me to look at your horoscope for you and tell you what the next 6 months are kind of holding in store for you and the changes that are being brought on through the eclipse, I can do that. You can schedule something through my astrological services page on AuthenticAstrology.com. But I'm not going to do on-the-spot readings for, like somebody just put what energies for Purva Bhadrapada Moon Nakshatra. Well, those are just general things. I would be just giving you a generalization. Okay. Somebody just said, I'll be waiting for my call, right? They said I was going to call India. Okay. So everybody, tell me what's going on for you, right? I'm doing all the talking. I want to hear all of you doing the talking. Come on. Chop, chop, chop. Let's see what everybody has to say. How's the eclipse got you all feeling today? And while you're typing things in your box, I'm going to have a drink. Yeah, somebody's just saying they've been going through changes in communication with people all over the place and feeling drained. That's a common thing, because right now the energies are hyping up. Everybody's beginning to feel it. Sensitivities are higher. That is something that's quite common during eclipses. And you got to take care of yourself during that time. You got to take a break. That's why I posted something on my Facebook page just a couple of days ago, you know, to make sure you're drinking lots of fluids and make sure that you're getting lots of rest at this particular period of time, because there are a lot of changes going on within you as an individual too. And you can't forget that. It's not just the world at large, it's also you too. Somebody else is saying they may have a new job and need to move, and they'll know in 10 days. And see, you'll find things like this happen in eclipses dependent upon what it's interacting with in your chart. Prominent planets will get triggered by that eclipse, and it will mark very strong changes for an individual. And that those changes are going to be far-reaching. And so eclipses are good for that. They're good for bringing on change. Somebody else is saying they're having issues with their parents, their mood and health. Yeah. So is anybody really freaking out about this? Right? Well, if you are freaking out, I just want you to know that it's going to be, you know, pretty okay. Right? Even if it feels difficult, it's going to be okay because it's all necessary. Some of the key points that are happening in the chart is basically wherever Mars is at in your chart, that marks an area that's going to be intensifying in one of the problem areas. So for instance, if Mars rules the 2nd and the 7th, you'll probably be looking at a lot about your relationship with your family or how you value relationships. If Mars happens to be in the 4th and the 11th, you might be looking at your ideas to build future security or where you want to live in the future. And you might be having problems with all of those things. So why is that happening? Well, Mars is really close to the sun, okay, at the time of this eclipse. And when you have a planet that is combust, which is what happens when a planet is close to the sun, I'm going to give you, here's a coffee cup, but pretend that it's the sun, okay? And here's the Earth. So here's Mars. Mars at the time that it's combust will be behind the sun. And so the rays of Mars don't make it to the Earth. You see? That was a good cup of tea. The rays of Mars don't make it to the Earth. So those areas that Mars represents in your chart, basically those areas are a little bit out of sync. And it's to bring your attention to those areas and look at, you know, what you need to do, right? It's showing you, hey, this is a problem area. This is something that you've perhaps been neglecting and you need to pay attention to it, right? So Mars areas specifically can be difficult. You may also, during this particular time, feel a heightened potential to, well, for lack of a better way to put it, to have explosions of your energy, right? Also to be uncertain of how you should direct your energy, because that Mars is hiding behind the sun, but Rahu is also conjuncting Mars at this particular period of time. Those planets are all in the same nakshatra. It's going to, at the time of the eclipse, it's going to be basically Rahu, and it's going to be the sun, and it's going to be the moon, and it's going to be Mars, all within Magha nakshatra, using the calculations that I work with, right? Some key things to the equation. Some key things to the equation, all right? Because if you're looking at Magha nakshatra, you need to look at Ketu. If you're looking at Ketu, you need to look at the nakshatra Ketu is in, right? And people are going to type, well, I thought Rahu was here and Ketu was here. I used some different calculations for the nakshatras. That's a topic for a whole other video. They are sidereal nakshatras. They're just based on the equatorial position. But Ketu is also in Dhanishta nakshatra. So there can be a tendency with this particular eclipse to feel a need to act out in a certain area, to prove your capacity to do something, to draw attention to yourself. And it can make you more prone to getting into power struggles with other individuals, when in reality, inside of yourself, you may just be a little bit uncertain of how to direct your energy and how you can work in the greatest partnership with yourself, and equally in the greatest partnership with other individuals in your life, in order to kind of make things better for you and also better for the other people involved in your life. There's a capacity to kind of go through what I'd like to call a volcanic eruption pattern, right? Or you've been keeping something suppressed for so long, and then it erupts and releases a lot of steam, and then it kind of gets suppressed and it erupts, and that happens over and over and over again. Ultimately, even though you may be tempted to kind of blame a lot of the things that are going on in your life right now on somebody else, ultimately it's you that's responsible. I once heard it put in a really good way about how all the negative emotions that we encounter in life are the real enemies in life, right? And it's not that we're supposed to hate those enemies and do battle with them, but we are meant to eradicate those enemies by bringing our attention to them and accepting them and offering them the love like we're supposed to do with anybody that we encounter as an enemy on a certain level. We have to accept that they are there. We may not be able to deal with it. We may have to distance ourselves from it, but we don't need to ignore the fact that it's there. So anger is an enemy, right? And when you're unable to confront your own anger or your own suppressed will in relation to something that's going on in your life, whatever it might be, whatever's ruled by Mars in your chart, in this particular instance, if you're unable to bring your attention to what it is that you feel that you really need to do, then that's going to get projected onto the world around you because it needs to get dealt with in one level or another. And a repressed Mars, when it gets projected onto your environment, especially if it's in proximity to Rahu, as it is right now, is going to bring into your life power struggles that are meant to make you take a look at where you're not dealing with something. And so you may blame it on somebody else, but really on a certain level, it's about you. Okay. Will this eclipse affect world politics? Well, every day of your life affects world politics, right? I'm not going to give a prediction on the Korea-US thing. I'm not going to give any predictions on things like that, because really that's a whole branch of astrology called mundane astrology. I like supporting things happening in a positive direction towards evolution, and I don't like focusing on freakouts other than to try to help to calm them down a little bit. Okay. Advice for someone who has extremely low self-esteem. Well, on one level, that would have to be based around the individual's chart and other factors in the chart, like what the sun is ruling. But it's about self-assuredness. If there's a debilitated sun, quite often it's about self-assuredness in social situations, right? And that generally, I'm going to say generally, revolves around an incapacity to accept oneself as perfect with all seeming imperfections that you might have, because you're made in this way because you're perfect. And if you're not accepting yourself, you're going to feel low about yourself, right? That's something to look at with this. And somebody else is saying, do Surya Namaskar. That's a good thing to do too, but also bring your attention to the fact that you're actually okay. And there may have been some authority figure in your past that maybe didn't make you feel that okay about yourself, because maybe they didn't feel that okay about themselves, right? You need to just kind of bring your attention to forgiving that person, which doesn't happen up here. It happens in here. You can think it up here, but until it releases here, it's not going to have any effect. But let it have its time, okay? Let's see, what else does anybody else have to say? Is the direction we are going to change when Mercury becomes direct? Well, Mercury retrograde is bringing your attention right now, because Mercury is regressing back through Purva Phalguni Nakshatra. It's making you look at how you're perhaps not helping yourself as much as you could, how you're perhaps getting in your own way. That's why I was having that big long tirade about blaming things on everybody else. So over the course of the next several weeks, it's going to make you take a deep look at that. And I believe September 19th, Mercury recovers its shadow. At that point, you'll begin to see some forward direction and progress with that. But I can't necessarily say that it's going to improve things for everybody generally at this particular period of time, because it depends on what it's interacting with your chart. And again, that's something you'd need to schedule a consultation for in order to sort out. Let's see what everybody else is posting in the window here. That may mean I go quiet for a minute, but I've been blabbing for a long time, so that's okay. I don't like to give general things based on people's charts and planetary positions. So somebody's saying they're having a Rahu return. So Rahu's returning to the 9th house. It's making you confront a change of philosophy in one area of your life, I should say. It's also kind of making you examine your relationship to children and your capacity to make decisions, but that's just a generalization. I need to really look at your chart in order to see all of it. Okay? Okay, I stated at the beginning, so I'm going to say this. I'll say it again. I'm not trying to be a quote unquote hard ass, so to speak, right? But I'm not going to make eclipse predictions based upon planetary positions in your chart. Okay, I'm not going to do it because it's incomplete. It's going to lead to inaccuracy. It's going to lead to you thinking in a certain direction that may or may not be fully accurate because I haven't looked at your chart. Okay. Somebody's saying to do a video on the Trimshamsha chart and how to interpret each house. I don't know if I'll get around to that for a really long time because I'm presently teaching a Varga course where I'm covering a lot of the Varga charts, and we will eventually get up to the Trimshamsha chart. And I'm needing to focus my time as much as possible on courses and clients. And so I'm doing maybe 1, 2, 3 videos a week and probably will not fit something like that in because I feel like I'm kind of covering that on my course, so to speak. Somebody says they're having sleepless nights again, right? Well, if you're freaking out about money, you know, a lot of it depends on your chart, so I don't want to go too deeply into it, but I would imagine that you might be having some things going on in relation to family, especially a sibling, or maybe things with your resources, so to speak. So I'm not making a prediction. This is where this is different. I'm trying to help somebody. So you got to find a way to put your mind at ease about all those particular things, but I can't just look at those factors in your chart and guess how this is all going to go for you. You just have to look at if there's separation between you and family, or if you're having difficulty with finances, you need to examine why you're having a difficulty with it and go to the source of the problem rather than letting yourself get into a freak out about what you think the issue might be. A lot of it might revolve around decisions that you're making, right? I would look at that, decisions that you're making, whether or not you're making wise decisions, okay? Why did astrologers make such a big deal of this eclipse? I will tell you why astrologers make a big deal of this eclipse, because there's a lot of astrologers in the US and the eclipse is moving right across the states, right? And plus there's a lot going on in the world around the time of this eclipse too, so people are making a big deal out of it. But for people who are in the States, this is a total solar eclipse and they haven't had one in a while. So a lot of the world media that we're getting tends to come from the States. And so you're getting a lot of things about that. In addition to that, whenever there's a total solar eclipse somewhere, and we have to face it, the US has a big share in the media market, so to speak. When it's the first solar eclipse that's total in a really long time, they begin to hype it up, and there's a lot of false things spreading around the media about this being the first solar eclipse in thousands of years, and it's just a complete load of you-know-what, because really eclipses happen twice a year. There's, 2 solar eclipses each year, really. So it's not that it never happens. It happens all the time, okay? As the sun is the karaka for father, will the eclipse affect the father? Now, that's just a general question, so I'll answer that. No, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to affect the father. It depends on what it's interacting with in your chart, especially, right? It's different. So it depends on the individual's chart. It's not just broadly, because if that was the case, everybody in the world would have something happen to their father with the eclipse. And that's not necessarily the case. But what is a broad thing is the fact that the sun represents the Atman. The Atman, for an easy way to translate that, is the soul of everything. That being the case, it also relates to the to the soul of the individual, because the soul of the individual is a part of the soul of everything. So when you have an eclipse, we are having our connection with our soul somewhat interrupted, so to speak. And then you put the moon, which is what an eclipse is. It's when you have a new moon in connection with the nodes. When you put the moon, which is manas, or our sensory mind, in association with that, well, basically, the moon will pass in front of the sun and we'll see the shadow side of the moon. So what's going on, and I'm making sure to explain that really thoroughly this time, because in one of my earlier videos, I said that the moon will cast a shadow on the sun. And what I meant is the moon's passing between the sun and the earth. Come on now, people, you know what I mean. But I probably should have said it a different way, because obviously the moon's not casting a shadow on the sun. It's just you're seeing the shadow of the moon pass in front of the sun. Okay, and because that shadow of the moon is passing in front of the sun, the shadow of our manas, or our sensory mind, or the way we're perceiving things, there's some dark areas in association with that that are eclipsing our capacity to see how our soul would approach a certain set of circumstances. And so there's a disruption there. There's a feeling that this is all out of my hands, right? And on a certain level, it is all out of your hands, because changes are coming in a certain area of your life, and they have to happen. And this happens twice a year, okay? Somebody saying, hope all is well. Thank you, Heidi. I appreciate that. All is well. I'm kind of talking a lot these days, though, because I got my Hall's cough drops here, right? When you don't have fisherman's friend, these are a close second, right? It keeps you from losing your voice when you're talking all the time. I'm tempted to cut my hair. Well, why don't you? I'm having a haircut today. We can have a haircutting party. Woo-hoo! If the eclipse falls on the ascendant, does it necessarily have to affect the body in a negative way? No, not always. Not always. It depends. The eclipse, the ascendant is also the mind. It's also the head, right? So the eclipse is affecting the head, because it can make everybody think that the eclipse is going to affect their body. And it is affecting their body in a certain way, because it's affecting their head and making them think that it's going to always have to affect their body. And it doesn't. It doesn't always have to affect the body. The body. Woof, 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 woof. Somebody typed, who let the dogs out? Okay, what are my thoughts on looking at the eclipse? My thoughts on looking at the eclipse. Oh, on looking at the eclipse. I see what you're saying, with your glasses on. Well, I would say make sure you have eclipse glasses that aren't bought from some cheap, nickel and dime store, because you'll probably burn your eyes out. Okay. Make sure that you have the proper gear to do that. I'm not superstitious. I know what you're saying, Heidi. I got it. But I'm not superstitious about these things. I believe that the human mind and the human connection to the soul, especially if we surrender to God and recognize that God is in charge of all things, has the capacity to overcome any of the superstition things, right? But if that superstition is strong enough within you, you're going to tend to believe it. And so while I deal with astrology and things like that, I'm not big on superstition. I'm big on recognizing that all these things that are impacting you are evolutionary forces that are there to guide you to grow. And you can either make use of it or you can ignore it. Generally, do eclipses affect divisional charts? That's a good question. Let's talk about that for a second. I'm trying to figure out how to do this without having a diagram in front of me, because I can't have a diagram in front of me. Okay, so let's say you've got your Rashi chart, the main birth chart, and you're looking at transits to that birth chart. Okay, so let's say, for instance, you are a Taurus ascendant. Okay, let's say you're a Taurus ascendant, and this eclipse is passing over your fourth house, right? That could have something to do with your mother. That could have something to do with your fortune. Okay, it could have something to do with a separation from a relationship and how you feel about that. So on one level, that's letting you know that you need to look at several different divisional charts in order to understand what's going on based upon the dasha that you're in and what that dasha is bringing to the surface. So you might want to look at the Dwadashamsha, right? I'm not big on doing where are planets transiting in the divisional chart. I think you can do a lot more with astrology, with transits, if you look at what something that's transiting in the sky represents in a divisional chart. You can get to it a lot easier without having to make things more complex for yourself than they need to be. I hope that makes sense because I can't draw a diagram. Okay. Okay, so, but yeah, you know, they will affect divisional charts, but basically the way to understand it is the Rashi chart is a divisional chart. Believe it or not, Rashi chart is a divisional chart. It's a divisional chart that's dividing the sky. It's dividing the circle, you know, around you in a certain way, right? It's dividing the ecliptic into 12 equal portions, right? I'm not getting into any sidereal tropical thing. I don't do that, okay? But it divides everything in 12 equal portions. That's a divisional chart. It's a divisional chart that marks the life path. So if you're seeing where that eclipse is affecting the life path, you're going to be able to go into the divisional charts and have an understanding of what's going on, right? And let's say, for instance, right? Let's say, for instance, you happen to be in a sun dasha, right? And sun rules the fourth in your Rashi chart, because we were talking about a Taurus ascendant, and you go into your Dwadashamsha, and perhaps your Matrikarika is the sun, or perhaps the fourth lord in your Dwadashamsha is also the sun. Well, then there can be some things coming up with mother, because basically the sun is transiting its own house in the Rashi chart, and it's an indicator both in the Dwadashamsha and in the Rashi chart for mother. Now, that's very difficult to explain verbally, and I don't have anything in front of me. Maybe I'll do a video on that sometime in the future. A good way to work with transits. Because sure, you can go, okay, where is that planet transiting in my divisional chart? But it's going to be a lot easier for you if you just take factors from the divisional chart that are being represented by the transiting planets and see if there's anything in association with that. That's about as simple as I can explain it verbally. Maybe I'll do a video on that in the future. Okay. If you feel miserable and sad at the time of the lunar eclipse, does this mean that the eclipse will adversely affect me? No, not necessarily. Somebody said they would like to interview me on their channel if I have time one of these days. Yes, Heidi, anytime you'd like, you just contact me and we'll set something up. Okay? I'd love to do that. Okay. Somebody's typing Rahu and 9th house Jyeshta Nakshatra aspected by Leo Mars. I stated earlier I'm not going to get into eclipse predictions for people based upon simple factors in your chart. In the D9 chart, will the eclipse affect or bring something forth whichever house it passes through? Well, if you've got the moon transiting somewhere in the sky, and if you're looking at transits to divisional charts too, the moon's going to affect something. So everything is always going to affect things in different areas of your life, but whether or not that's going to be a big deal or not is all dependent upon the dasha that you're in. Okay. Let's see what we've got going on. Okay, well, somebody's asking about combustion and Kazemi and everything like that. Combustion, basically something that I want to state, but I want to answer somebody else's question first about Ketu Dasha. You have to look at the houses Ketu is conjunct in each divisional chart. That's how you can get some information on that. Okay? Do you give any credence to Kazemi versus combustion? I want to talk about combustion, first of all, from a different angle, and this may not answer your question, but I want to go into it anyway because it's important. Combustion is based upon local space, okay? Because one of the things, this is a similar thing for planetary war. Over the centuries, astrologers have gotten lazy in terms of calculating combustion, and they've gotten lazy in terms of calculating planetary war, to the extent that they go, if a planet is within a certain amount of degrees of the sun, it's combust, and if a planet is within 1 degree of another planet, then it's planetary war. But it wasn't really meant to be calculated this way, and if you read in Surya Siddhanta, you'll find evidence that what I'm saying is true. It's just astrologers tend to want an easier way out, and it just kind of stuck. And, you know, I'm not kind of pointing fingers, it's just a natural thing. But to give you an idea, if you've ever heard that like Jupiter and Venus are conjuncting each other in the sky, and you go outside and you look up in the sky and you're expecting to see Jupiter and Venus sitting right on top of each other, and they're like this far apart. Well, they're that far apart for you because you're in one area of the planet, and somewhere else that you're at on the planet, they're going to be closer together. And it's a similar thing for combustion and planetary war. Some areas that planet, you know, some areas of the planet where you were born, those planets might be, that planet might be combust, and they might be in planetary war. And some areas they are not. So it's good to have astrology software that calculates combustion and planetary war as per the calculations in Surya Siddhanta. Okay? The degrees the eclipse will be at, that depends on how you carve up the sky. So I don't go into that because then it begins to bring all sorts of, you know, debate in the astrological community over, you know, which zodiac is the right zodiac. I'm right, you're wrong. No, 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 you're wrong. I'm right, you're wrong. No, 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 you're stupid. No, I'm not stupid. You know, it's just a load of it. Do we really need to argue about all that? I don't think so. Debate can be good if we can keep it, you know, calm, but people tend to not keep it calm, and that's a problem. So I don't want to go into the degrees of the eclipse, right? You can tend to look, you'll probably be able to, if you go on to astrodents.com or any, you know, Vedic astrology site too, that's using a sidereal zodiac, dependent upon your desire to look at that. And I'm keeping completely neutral in the middle with this. I am the man of mystery. And basically, if you go online, I'm sure you can find that information. I don't want to get into that because really it depends on how people are calculating things, what ayanamsha they're using, even if that, you know, it just depends on lots of different things. Okay. A few days ago, a Vedic astrologer in Serbia told me dogs are not ruled by Ketu, but by Rahu. What is your say on that? I've never really attributed rulership to dogs. You know, I might be saying that dogs are more, you know, are loyal. I would say, you know, if I had to choose between Ketu and Rahu, if I had to choose between Ketu and Rahu, I'd make it more Ketu because Ketu represents those things we're familiar with, right? You know, but I would say dogs are more solar because they're steadfast, they're true, they're willing to sacrifice. Okay. Is Durga worshiping good for Swati Nakshatra? Yeah, it can be. You know, especially things attributed to Rahu, Durga worship can always be good. I think Ketu is dogs too, Heidi. Durga worship can always be good for things like that. There's a specific technique for looking for the Ishta Devata, though. That's what I would always rely on. I know Kapil did a video on that. I might do a video on it someday too, but look for on Kapil's channel because I know he did a video on a technique to judge what the Ishta Devata is. And that'll kind of give you some good information too. Okay, got a few more minutes and I'm gonna have to say goodbye for the day, but hey, you know, doing my little tap dance, like I was thinking Saturn for dogs too, but you're interrupting my tap dance, okay? At this point, you can go visit my astrological services page and schedule an astrological service with me. There we go, we got the 10-second public service announcement out of the way. Yeah, I've thought about Saturn with dogs too, because Saturn can be very, you know, disciplined, can be very steady. Dogs can be that way too, but Saturn also has difficult connotations too. So I'm not that wild about that attribution. Okay. How do many relationships end after an eclipse, or does it get deeper usually? It depends on the chart. It's all dasha dependent, people. I have to tell you that. I know you'd like some blanket answer, but that doesn't work. And I hate to say it, but cookbook astrology doesn't work either. You got to really look at the horoscope. You know, any astrologer will tell you that. You have to look at the horoscope. You have to know all the factors that are being brought to the surface. Yeah. Yeah, I think that the astrological community here that's gathered today are in agreement that if you had to choose between K2 and Rahu for dogs, that it's going to be K2. Okay. No, cats are vicious. Okay. Cats are vicious and random. Okay, will the area Rahu is in natal chart be affected by this eclipse like Mars? If Mars rules Rahu, that can impact Rahu because Mars is going to be combust at this time, right? But it depends on angles formed to particular areas of your chart. Okay, let's see, and maybe I can take one more question. One more question before I zoom off for the day. Thank you all for watching, first of all. So the eclipse is going to be in Leo, dependent upon the, hang on a second. Let's hide. You think that an astrologer would know the degree of every single planet on every single day their whole life. But you know, to be quite honest, I keep my head so wrapped up in other people's charts. It will be in Leo regardless of which zodiac you're using. Yes. Okay. Are we to avoid going out in the eclipse? If you believe that you have to avoid going out in the eclipse, then do that. If you think that you have to go out and do something, do that too. Life continues on. You don't have to hide because of the eclipse. It's not necessary. You don't have to hide. Stay indoors, just like you know, like a lot of people go into this whole thing during Mercury retrograde, like they shouldn't sign contracts or shouldn't travel or shouldn't do this, that, or the other thing. And you know what? Most of the times I've had foreign travel in my life have been during Mercury retrograde periods. And I've signed a lot of agreements with people during Mercury retrograde periods, and they've worked out just fine. You know, so you can't just say blanket thing, that's going to create a problem. Actually, Mercury retrograde in terms of concrete things like contracts can be good periods for that because it'll make you go over the small print. Is the Earth flat? Is my nose like a triangle? Is this cup flat? Right? I'm not getting into that. I'm not going to get into the whole flat Earth theory thing. What issues from the past will bring the eclipse in Maga? It depends on your chart. You can't just say it's going to be this. You can do meditation if you're scared of going out. Yes, thank you, Kali Maharana. That's a good thing to say. Okay? You can do meditation if you're scared of going out, but you don't have to be afraid of going out. You don't have to. Have a strong soul. You're able to do these things. Does combustion last the whole life or does it improve over time? I say generally it gets better after 40. You know, that's what my experience has been. I have combust planets. I'm not going to tell. All right, so I'm going to have to go, people, but if you would like, please do feel free to visit my astrological consultations page. If you would like some astrological guidance, you don't have to fit your consultation in before the eclipse. The Earth isn't going to collapse. The sky isn't going to fall if you don't have your consultation before the eclipse. As a matter of fact, the changes you're going through with the eclipse are going to be going on for the next several months. So if you're wanting to understand where this is impacting you based upon the eclipse, you can still schedule something in and know after the eclipse what is, you know, where things are heading for you. Okay. There should be a link in my video if you want to visit my astrological services page. Okay. Why the sun does not combust Rahu? Because Rahu is not a concrete thing in the sky. It's just a point that creates an eclipse. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Have an excellent day. We will talk to you in the near future. Bye now. If I can find the button. Bye now.